So, hello, Jeff. My name is Stephane. I'm an agile coach and also a professional coach in France. I work within Nowshak, which is a collective of agile coach. And because you are now stuck, like every one of us
Yeah,
in the world, you took on yourself to have some time and discussions
yeah.
with the rest of us, which is very a rare opportunity to have some special time with you. And I want to thank you for that.
Well,
Uh,
it's been my pleasure.
Now you are in Utah. I'm in France. It's 9 a.m. for you in the morning. It's 5 o'clock here. So it's nearly time for the beer.
Yeah,
I will have one after
yeah.
to celebrate that.
You should bring one now. Maybe I should start now too.
It's always 5 p.m. somewhere in the world, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Um, I want to start with some questions with you regarding user stories,
Yeah,
if it's okay for you.
sure. Yeah.
Um, First question. I think you have given many trainings, many conferences, and when you're on the field, maybe with people on the teams, and you start explaining things, when do you see the declic, the light bulb starting to light up? Uh, how could you tell us when you see that?
Yeah.
When is it happening?
Is this the interview part, or is it? I can. Uh,
Oh,
well, I
this
guess
is the
we can use any of the stuff that goes for an interview.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah
It's funny. Well, actually, I'm gonna flip it on you for just a minute. You've been doing agile coaching for a while, right? Uh,
yes.
yeah. How long have you been
Oh,
doing?
it's been 6 7 years now.
Yeah. Um, the are user stories are something you teach and talk about, coach with the people you work with too, correct?
Yeah.
Um, user stories. Funny, I'm not sure. When do I see the question is when do I see the light go off?
Mm.
Uh, it What happens, I think, is I don't see it go off. What I find is it's a slow thing. It's a and it almost creeps up on you before you understand it, or before you, uh, because it takes a while. I don't. It's not like I say something and people get it, or I'll sometimes we'll talk about stories and people seem to get it, and then they forget it, or it looks like the light goes off, but then they start using stories, and then it kind of falls apart. Um, Maybe if I back up, the 2 points that I always make in talking about stories, and that they're the two opening points in the story mapping book, are that
Mhm.
stories get their name not from how they're written, but how they're meant to be used. Stories refer to storytelling and telling stories. And the concept that's pushed at the beginning of the story mapping book is this concept of shared understanding. If you were to look at the
You mean
way,
this book?
yeah, that book, yep. You don't have the French version. No.
Uh, Obviously not.
Yeah, yep, definitely not. But how can I say
Telling stories.
yeah, so the idea was, it doesn't matter what you write down or how you write a story. A story becomes a story because you and I meet together and we talk to each other. And you don't just talk, you talk, and you uh, use a whiteboard. You bring in examples and drawings and everything else, and you talk until we have shared understanding. The most retweeted phrase from that story mapping book is that shared documents aren't shared understanding. So where most people get bound up is they want to write user stories. They want to write stories using that as a user. I want that format,
Mhm.
and that's not the story. When I hear the term, how do you write good user stories, in my head, it sounds like, how do you write a good stand-up meeting? You don't. You can write down what you're going to say when you show up, but you have to show up and you have to talk. uh, as a coach, you might have heard the old story mantra of card, conversation, confirmation.
The 3 C's, yeah.
Yeah. So the conversation is the most important part. It doesn't matter what you write on the card. It matters that you talk. So I see a lot of people teaching and coaching stories, and they coach people how to write them. And what I find is that what we forget is that it's the storytelling that matters. It's the building shared understanding that matters. Well, so I guess that's point number one. And people just don't get that. You tell them, look, it doesn't matter how you write it. You can write it any way you want. But you've got to change your process so that, that's what backlog refinement is for. And that's what just frequent conversations are for. You've got to change your process so that you're talking and so that you're worrying a little bit less about crafting a perfect requirements document or a perfect set of acceptance criteria or things like that. If the person you're working with, if you understand each other, then the perfect document isn't necessary. Perfect documents are only necessary when in organizations that don't use actual stories, that aren't actually using storytelling to build shared understanding. So that's thing one is that it's about collaboration and shared understanding. And thing number two is I'll discuss the difference between output and outcome. Output is what you build. Outcome is what happens when things come out. It's how users will use what you've built. So we tell stories about the outcome. You can tell a story about what a piece of software looks like and what it does, but it's much more powerful to tell the story about a person who has a problem and uses the software and how they use it to get something done. Now, that common story format is the simplest way to kind of talk about the user, remind us that's what we should be talking about. But again, what you write down isn't the story. What you write down, what you write down isn't the story any more than, the title of a book is a book. Or and again, stories are meant to be told, not written. And yes, we write down a lot of things to help us remember or recall what we talked about.
That's so simple and so mind-blowing what you say.
Well, the interesting thing is the people that get it, it slowly creeps up over time, and they start to realize that yes, they continue to write stories, but they become a lot more flexible in how they write them. They realize it matters a lot less. They do keep a lot of documentation, a lot of sketches, because one of the concepts in the story mapping book is what I'll refer to as the vacation photo effect. If I show you one of my vacation photos, you can see what's in the picture and you can comment on what's in the picture. All you know is what you see in the picture. But when I see my vacation photo, I remember being there. I remember what I heard, what I smelled. I remember what happened before that. I remember what happened after that. The picture helps me remember. When you collaborate with people and you have a document or you draw something on a whiteboard or you discuss something together, when you see it later on, you remember what you talked about, not just what's in the document. And we rely on that. So people that starts to sink in and they start to work that way, it's a slow process, and they work that way, and they would never not work that way. But your first question was, when do you see the light go off? It just slowly turns up. And for the people that really get it. Yes, I see situations where the light will go off. Sometimes the concept of collaboration helps. One of the calls I did earlier this week, I found I was talking with a product owner for a company, and she lived in Glasgow in Scotland, and she was talking about their team has a lot of work to do. They're getting more work, and she's the product owner. She's getting more and more stressed because it's getting tougher and tougher to keep up.
Yeah.
Because what keeping up meant to her was that she had to write a lot more stories and write a lot more acceptance criteria, and that the work was just tough. And I told her, no, don't stop. It's okay. Write a little bit, and it's a collaborative thing. Work on them together. The goal is shared understanding, not the goal isn't for you to churn out a lot of documents.
I understand.
The
In your opinion,
say again.
in your opinion, do you think it's coming from all those tools? Tell about Jira, target process, whatever, that induce us to produce those cards, to produce those stories, to produce those tickets. Did you see an evolution towards that through the years when those tools came in the field?
Gosh, it's hard to. One of the companies that I do work with and have worked with from time to time over the years is Atlassian. They make Jira. Atlassian makes the tool. They don't use the tool. They what's a good way to put it? They know how to do this shared understanding thing. They know how to do collaboration, and they recognize Atlassian refers to Jira as a tracking system, not a collaboration tool. Or although they're working, they do a better job with, multiple people can share a document and edit it at the same time. And when you're trying to collaborate at a distance, you need a tool like that allows multiple people to edit at the same time, like Google Docs does, or other things do. It makes it a two-way conversation around the document, not just like a whiteboard can be a two-way conversation. But what you see when you walk around Atlassian is lots of whiteboard space and lots of evidence that they have lots of face-to-face conversations and lots of discussion about their stories, and then they record things in Jira. What we're fighting, because I believe for the most part, they as a company that make the tool get it and use the tool appropriately. But we come from such a long tradition of people leaning on documents. Every process up until the concept of stories was pushed, every process leans on creating accurate documentation or better specifications or better requirements or all those things. And people have worked for years to try and do that. So you take people with that mindset and you give them a tool, they use the tool to store ever more accurate documents. Is the tool's fault? I don't know. It's like blaming paper for the evil things that people write. If we didn't have paper, maybe that would have stopped
maybe
that.
Maybe as coaches, we should focus on what is the value the people put onto the effort or the work itself to put so much effort on documentation. Maybe
we all have, humans want to feel safe. They want to feel like they've done the right thing, that they're protected. They want to get rid of uncertainty. And if they can write something down in a very, very precise way, that helps them feel safe. But the thing I'm trying to point out with the shared understanding thing, it doesn't matter how precise you write something, it matters what the reader hears and sees in that. You may work very hard to write something precisely, but if the reader doesn't understand it or understand it with the same level of precision, it doesn't matter. People want the certainty, and I think everybody keeps going back to documents so that they can have that level of precision. Okay. It's interesting. One of the biggest charades in modern society is the legal contract, or the contract you sign when you apply for a credit card, with thousands of words written in tiny type, and you sign it and you agree to it as though you read it and understood it, and
That's true.
and everybody knows you didn't. The only reason that contract is written is to make the writer of the contract safe, to make them feel safe. And when people keep trying to do that with specifications and requirements, and the Agile Manifesto value, customer collaboration over contract negotiations, that's what it refers to. Anyway, but it's hard to, it's easy to say that, but it's hard to break people of the habit of wanting to write things down specifically and feel safe.
If it's okay with you, I want to get back to what I think you said before about the three C's, and the story about the conversation. What I tell to the people I coach is that the user story doesn't exist. It's an intellectual container, something conceptual that we try to make alive, and it starts to exist when we have the conversation.
Yeah.
And in fact, it exists. It starts to exist if it's there for everyone, and also here in the heart of everyone.
Yeah.
What do you think about this?
I believe that. I agree with the way you're explaining it. The story is a container. It isn't the way it's written; it's the way it's used. And yeah, you fill it up. You fill it up. You use collaboration to fill it up, and you know it's working when everybody who collaborates has shared understanding. And yes, you fill it up with documents in the same way you fill up a scrapbook with family photos to help you remember things. But those family photos don't yes, the story fills up over time. Yes, the story is a container. I agree. Back to that vacation photo effect. If you had a choice, if I could send you to a beautiful tropical island, and you could have a week-long fabulous vacation, but you weren't allowed to take any pictures, or I could give you a photo album filled with pictures from somebody else who had gone to that tropical island and taken a lot of things. Which would you rather have?
I like this one. I like this one so much.
What's more important, the document or the experience? What will you remember more? And I see so many people trying to short circuit that and stop the conversation, stop the experience, and replace it with the document.
Okay, nice. Talking about, you talked about the book, which is a must-have for everyone. I do teach a lot of content from that. I always start with the morning routine exercise, which is really great because it talks to everyone. And
if you find something better, I keep trying to find different things or better things, but it's just the easiest way to help people get.
No, really. It's just as simple as it is perfect because everyone has a morning routine, and you have wonderful conversations between men, women, fathers, mothers. I like the part where we can talk about the makeup. Makeup is always a subject of discussion.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah. What do you do in 5 minutes or not? But I sometimes struggle when I try to transition from this theoretical exercise, which is perfect, to their real operations, when they have to think about the reality. What is the metaphor or the key you use to go from that concept to their reality?
Let's do something really quick. If you see me talk or deliver a talk, you know that I can't talk without drawing pictures.
Yeah, I do too.
So you can see the screen I'm sharing, right?
Yeah, perfect.
The one thing, I'm probably overdue for writing a second edition of the story mapping book. But the one thing I'll tell people is if you're going to tell a story, you need to understand what your product is, what is the thing that you're building or responsible for. You need to understand who its users are, and you need to understand, their activities. What do they do? And then if you're going to tell a story, the only thing you need to be able to tell a story is a beginning and an end. That's it. So I'll tell people, look, we're going to tell a story about the product. We're going to call it life. The user is going to be you. So that's you. There's a lot of different activities that you do to read your life or to go through your life, but we're going to choose one big activity called get ready for work. And then the beginning of that activity is the moment you wake up. and it goes and ends when you arrive at work. That's usually the way I do that. And in the process of telling that get ready for work story, they end up writing a bunch of cards and sticky notes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Now I'll say, great, you just figured out how to do this, and we can come back. And there's a lot of lessons they learn from doing this. They learn that if products have more than one user, and they learn that so if they're mapping get ready for work, a map becomes a synthesis not of one user's experience, but a lot of users' experience. That, like you said, people with and without kids, people that have very different morning routines, and they learn that the map gets really messy because it's not a map about a person or an abstract user. It's about a lot of specific people, and it has a lot of variation and things that some people do and some people don't, and the flow or the order becomes a problem. And they learn all those things, and then I'll say, okay, let's stop. Let's take a look at your product. Let's talk about Jira as a product. Let's talk about Jira's users. Let's choose one of those users. Let's call it a product owner. And let's, if I were to look at that product owner and look at all the things that they do, if I want to create a small map, let's choose one of those things that they do. Let's call it create a backlog item. And the beginning of that story starts the minute they want to create, or they start, and it ends when the backlog item is created.
Mm-hmm.
And the result of that is a step-by-step map. It's the same thing. Now, it's easy. What they end up with is a map of their product's experience as it is today. And that's not something I talked about enough in the story mapping book. Then I say, okay, well, once you get the hang of this, if you can work with that same product and identify a user, and if you've got a new idea for a new thing you want users to be able to do in your product, then write down that new thing you want them to do, figure out a beginning of the story and an end of the story, and tell it. And what they see is this, okay, yeah, it's exactly the same as the way I did things. It's just when you start telling a story, this is where things get twisty. When you start telling a story about a piece of functionality that does not yet exist, it requires that you imagine the future. It requires that you, it's easy when you're mapping getting up in the morning because you can remember what you did.
Yeah.
But it becomes really hard to map a new piece of functionality because there's nothing to remember. You have to imagine. It's an act of creative writing, or it's storytelling. That's it. And that makes it hard for some people. And people flip into capture the requirements mode and start saying, well, what do you want me to build? Not
exactly.
Let's imagine what users do. This is a hard, it's a hard leap from mapping the present, the present day, let's say, which you do when you're mapping that getting ready for work thing, or which I ask people to do that now with their products, so they get the hang of mapping software, not just getting ready in the morning. But when you transition to mapping the future, some future world, that's where it gets a little bit, that jump gets hard for people. But once they've done this, at least they understand the structure of the form, and they understand, oh, it's not hard because I don't understand how to map. It's hard because imagining the future is hard.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Of course. And maybe I was trying to be more focused on the process itself, on the facilitation of it, but not trying to get enough the experience, the point of view of the person who is attending the workshop. And in fact, you are right. I think it's so easy to know what we are doing every day, but what do we really want? It's often much more easy to know what we don't want.
Yeah. Yes.
People are really, really efficient to say, I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't want that. But what do you really want
Yeah.
is often difficult for the near future.
So this is one of the things that makes us, and this is one of the things that makes story mapping hard in general, is it's hard to build this future world map or imagine it, because it means you have to make a lot of decisions. These are design decisions about what we should build or what our users' experience should be like. And that's hard. And just like you said, it's easy to imagine what we don't want, but hey, we can't build what we don't want. We have to build what we want, and we have to make some decisions. That makes the mapping hard. But it isn't the mechanics of mapping that are hard. It's the deciding part. And that's the value of doing this, is it forces us to think about all those hard things. You can think about the hard things now, or you can think about them later. This is one of the problems with just that basic story format. You can say, as a user, I want something, so that, okay, great, now I know what you want, but now I'm still left the problem of deciding what that thing you want looks like, and how you'll use it to get that benefit. You gotta have that conversation. People worry so much. Imagine a book author who spent most of their time worrying about the title of their book and no time writing the book. And people worry so much about writing that story, and spend very little time worrying about actually being able to tell the story.
Yeah, that's true. I'm looking at the time box because that's a reflex for me. Sorry about that. I think
we're okay to go a little bit over as well. I've got I do the calls for 45 minutes so that I can kind of set up the next one. So
maybe, if it's okay for you, a last question about user stories, and maybe we can go to the second part about maybe a more personal interview. Yeah. Nothing too personal, but if it's okay for you.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. My last question would be about the frameworks. Today we have the Church of Safe, we have the Church of Scrum, the Church of Less, the Church of you name it. From your point of view, what could be the impact, or what impacts have you seen on the user stories when those different frameworks appeared?
Oh. When we talk about these frameworks, what you're talking about is scaling frameworks, correct?
Yes.
And yeah, you've got scaled agile framework, and you've got large scale Scrum, and Scrum at scale, and a bunch of others. One fundamental problem with a lot of the frameworks is they do not deal well with this concept of discovery work. Look, if you have an idea to build something, if the only thing you're responsible for is getting it built, if the only thing you're responsible for is the output, the working software, then you've got to look. You start every sprint with a fixed time box, with a fixed cost, because you've got a team that's a fixed cost, and the team estimates scope, or how much they can get done in every sprint. And at the end of every sprint, you assess quality. If all you're responsible for is that's one thing. And if this idea is really big and you need to do it at scale, then you need to be able to break down that scope into lots of small parts and distribute it over lots of teams, things like that. So those scaling frameworks handle that stuff well. But I spend a lot of time talking about outcome. Outcome is not measured in whether you built the software on time or not. Outcome is what happens when that software hits the world. An outcome is measured by whether people see, try, use, keep using and whether they say good things about your product. You can think of that as, it's usage, it's satisfaction. If you're building things for internal use, you worry about things like, are they more efficient? Are they more effective? Do they make less, they do better work, make fewer errors, things like that. All of these things are measured, can only be measured after release. And most of them are measuring people's behavior, whether they actually do it, and how good they are doing, and their satisfaction. So if you're responsible for this, and it should be dead obvious here that when we talk about value, all the value comes from this. If you build software on time, under budget, and everybody agrees that it looks good, but no one uses it, there's no value in it. If you build software and you deliver less scope than you promised, and you took longer than anyone expected, but you deliver it and everybody uses it and gets a lot of value out of it, that's valuable. So whether, if I ask you, what is one of your favorite products, one that you use a lot, you don't say, I love this product because it was delivered on time. You say, I love this product because I use it a lot and I get a lot of value out of it. On time has nothing to do with value. Mm-hmm. But these scaling frameworks sort of optimize for this. Now, the problem with this outcome stuff is there is a lot of uncertainty. We don't know if we're solving people's problems. We don't know if they'll really use it. And the way we chase out that uncertainty is, well, this discovery work stuff. That's where we expose uncertainty, and we create tests or experiments. This is where you get lean startup kinds of thinking and
UX design.
Lean UX. Look, if people have to see, try, use, and keep using your software, well, then it has to be easy to learn to use. It has to first solve a problem that they really have, and it has to be easy to learn to use. Now, you could build scalable, shippable software and then ship it and find out if it's easy to learn to use. But the fastest way is with an experiment or a prototype. And these scaling frameworks don't squarely deal with discovery work. In traditional Agile, the only kind of discovery work that is commonly done is technical discovery work. The stuff that we do to figure out if we can build it on time. Mm-hmm. And because that's often all we're worrying about is this time, cost, and scope stuff. The technical discovery work in traditional Agile is called a spike. You do a spike in order to understand your technical options and figure something out. A spike is technical discovery work, but we do not do spikes in traditional Agile on all this other stuff. We don't ask, will people see it and use it? Will enough of them use it? Will they actually be more efficient if they're using it? In traditional Agile and in a lot of these scaling frameworks, we make this leap we bet that we're going to get the outcome so long as we can get it built. But yeah, if we were accurate at all at guessing that people would use the stuff we built, every one of us would be a .com millionaire. If it was that easy, and we know it's not. So you ask, what's the effect of these scaling frameworks? Is they're pretty squarely focused on this kind of work, and they seem to draw us farther and farther away from that kind of work. It wasn't until SAFe version 4.3 that they even started to talk about this kind of stuff. And it's a sidecar. It's outside. It's not inside the team. It's done outside the team. The discovery is an outside process, not an inside process. Anyway, that's one of my biggest gripes. There's probably others, but when you take a large process, SAFe is a lot more formal than less or Scrum at scale. when you start formalizing things, safe is our backslide back into the rational unified process. And again, back to our earlier conversation where we talked about people like documents make them feel safe. People like precise process because that makes them feel safe. And yeah, it's ironic that it is called safe because it's not safe in that it actually works better. It's safe in that it actually makes us feel better because it's
comfortable.
It feels safe, or
it feels comfortable.
It's comfortable. It's comfortable for the people that are worried, or comfortable for the people that don't want to be blamed, I guess, when things go wrong.
And I really do agree with you. We are so far from the customer.
Yeah.
And we think so strongly and so deeply that we know the customer so well every day that when we are surely enough sure that we know him or her better than himself or herself, then the party is lost, the game is lost.
Yeah. And that's knowing the customer is the source of it moves your focus to outcomes. You do not need to know the customer to build software, to build working software, but you do in order to get a successful outcome. And that's
all right.
And doing anything at scale starts to obfuscate that a little bit. Building big things does. When you move decision making out of teams and away from individuals, and you take big things, break them down, and hold teams responsible for just building what they were asked to build, that's moves us farther away from outcomes.
I've never met yet a customer, a client, asking me how I would be able to upscale their culture.
Yes.
I would really dream about something like that.
Yeah.
Thank you for all those technical precisions, and really, it's really amazing that even after all those years, having just a few words and a few minutes of discussions with you, it lights up a lot of things. Thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Did you we need to do a lot of this? I'll send you the recording. You could clip apart and do an interview.
The recording is
video editor, but
the recording is fine.
You want to do a different kind of interview?
Yeah, can we move to part two? Part two would be more about you, Jeff. So if you feel uncomfortable about the questions I'm going to ask, please feel free not to answer, but it's just to maybe know more about you and more about yourself, if it's okay with you.
Sure. And
we will maybe begin with the first question, which is really very, very easy for you. It comes in the form of a sentence with not an end, so you have to complete. For you, agile is what?
For me, agile is a way of thinking about problems. It's a way of it's a lot of things. It's a way of thinking about the way we collaborate with people. It's a way of thinking about problems and how we break problems down into smaller things and focus on moving forward in small steps, but keep our eye on the problem. That's what it is for me. Now, one of the things I worry about sometimes is Agile was a way of focusing on building software that people asked for, and what Agile needs to be more is focused on outcomes, building successful things, not building what stakeholders want, not building what customers ask for, not building what your boss asks for, what your product owner asks for, building something that actually gets used by people and actually generates value. And that's one of the things that goes a little bit wrong with today's Agile sometimes.
So you're talking more about the impact on our world, on our society that we can bring through this agile mindset, right?
Yeah, it's one of the things that's muddy in the agile mindset is the focus on outcome versus the focus on being more efficiently delivering what you're asked to do versus focusing on the outcome and what happens with the thing that you just built.
Thank you. That's very clear. Second question now. What makes you get up and get out of bed every day now, Jeff? Because now you have some experience, you've worked with so many companies, and after all those years, what makes you get out of bed?
Oh my gosh, that's not a fair question. These days, it's because I've got to get up and exercise because I'm getting old and I need to stay healthy. These days, I need to get out and get to clients because I need to earn money because I have 2 kids to put through college and they're choosing expensive colleges, things like that. What I wanted to do when I started this is make the world safer for people who are really trying to build software or build technology products that matter, that they care about. And what I wanted or what I envision is a world where where everyone gets to show up for work and be proud of what they're doing and be proud of what they're creating and being proud of the impact they made by creating things. And agile thinking is kind of it was one of the best hopes we have for doing that. So yeah, altruistically, I want to see the world be safer for people who actually aren't just using software development as a job or as a way to make money, but as a way to actually have some impact on the world. And yeah, doing things this way also makes your work environment better. But look, I've been doing this I started with extreme programming in the year 2000, and I was building software a decade before that. So I've been doing agile development as long as there's been agile development. And one of the things I'm getting old and tired about is, boy, those messages are hard. It's not always human nature to sometimes it's easier to focus on just doing what your boss tells you to do versus worrying about whether you're building software that matters and makes the world a better place. And sometimes it's easier to just do what that document told you to do versus go collaborate with someone to do that storytelling stuff. Sometimes the right thing isn't the easy thing, and that's one of the annoying things about agile development. It's not easy. So it keeps me busy repeating the same messages over and over for the last 20 years.
Thank you. It's very clear. And maybe to add on top of that, I was 10 minutes before we start our discussion doing a remote training, and in this training we have younger generations. I mean, at my age, everyone is younger than me, or starts to be younger than me.
Yes.
And maybe I see hope in them because they don't know the old way. They don't know waterfall. They don't know. And for them, when they start their journey, their professional journey, we start by talking to them about user stories, about collaboration. And I see really that maybe they are the hope that we need today.
I think, yeah, it's easier to, if people don't have to unlearn bad lessons or bad ways of doing things, that's going to be easier. Not to be pessimistic, I think we keep falling back into what we demonize as waterfall style thinking because it's safer, it's natural. And I don't think, yes, if we start new people out thinking, right, maybe they'll be more likely to use this way of thinking as they move forward into their careers, as they start doing their work. But I think there's something inherently human about humans suck. As long as there's been humans, we've backslid and done bad things, and we try and defend ourselves and protect ourselves at the expense of others and things like that. I think there's always going to be a pull to do things the wrong way because sometimes the wrong way feels safe or is safer for me personally. So we're fighting that always.
And maybe that leads us to the next question. Because I hear that things might get wrong at some point in your professional work or life, which is today, if you look backwards after all those years, what is your biggest frustration?
Biggest frustration with work or professional life, or
you as Jeff Patton, where if you look back to the 20 years about the line of work you're doing and about agile and having impact, what would be your biggest frustration?
Oh, for the most part, I don't have any. I've been extremely lucky. I've been, for a lot of people are very intentional about their careers and about what they're trying to accomplish in the world, and they may fall short and be disappointed. I've never been very intentional about it, so everything that happened was a surprise to me. The fact that I wrote a book that works well, the fact that I've been active and in the agile community for a long time, that's all a surprise to me. It wasn't intentional. It was compulsive. It's what I felt like I wanted to do. So there's no frustrations. Sometimes the only thing I get frustrated with a little bit is my own laziness. I could write a lot more. I could do a lot more, but I find that there's more things that I could or should be writing, but one of the things more things I could or should be writing, more things I could or should be talking about, but I find that the fundamentals are still not widely understood. So sometimes it's easier just to fall back on those. But yeah, I would love it if I were able to churn out not just one book, but 5 or 6 books. Or
well, you know that we are all waiting for that, right?
Yeah. I think everybody wishes they could be a little bit more prolific or more generate more output, I guess. But that's.
Oh, well,
I wish I'd figured out how to. Wish I'd figure out how to get a little bit more stuff out into the world. But that's.
Or maybe not. Maybe it's just fine that way. Thank you for sharing that. And maybe the last question to end. Jeff, what are you still dreaming of professionally?
What am I still dreaming of professionally? Yeah, these are tough questions. Right now,
I came prepared.
Right now, I'm in a position of trying to figure out what's next for me. What am I still dreaming of? Yeah, I'm still dreaming of. I still want to get another book out there to talk about a lot of the product thinking that I spend a lot of time in. But one of the things I most dream of is going back to actually just building software for a living, actually just doing the work instead of talking to other people about doing it. So that's what I want to do.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I think this is the end of the time box. It was really a pleasure to speak with you during these few minutes. Thank you so much. It was a very great experience, and I hope that our viewers will have very much value as we did this small interview. Thank you so much, Jeff.
You're very welcome.